Please explain why Immanuel Kant believed black people were incapable of moral, intellectual, or aesthetic experiences.
All right, that is a very complex question. The easiest way to answer probably is not by focusing on Kant himself, but more the period of thought that he represents. There were 4 questions Kant sought to answer. All right, number 1, he wanted to know, what can human beings know? Second, he wanted to know, what should we do? The third was, what should we hope for? And the fourth was basically, what is a human being? All right. So the first question, he developed methods of answering these questions. The first, in terms of what we know, was metaphysical. I know this is going to sound a little technical, but I'll get to a more watered down version of the answer soon. So the first was, he answered by metaphysics. What can we know? The second, what ought we to do, or what should we do? For him, that was morality. The third, what can we hope for? That was religion. And the fourth, what is man? That's anthropology. Now, getting to the real crux of the answer. Anthropology and what is man was the most important question for Kant. All right. What does it mean to be human? It wasn't just for him, but other philosophers of the time. If you want to talk about somebody like Descartes or other persons like Hume, they all want to know, what does it mean to be human? Now, here goes the part where Kant comes in. In the book, I used Kant because he believed, to put it in the most simplest terms, where you come from and how you look determine what kind of human you were, or if you even could be human. So he had an essay called On the Different Races of Men. He also had a writing called An Observation on the Feeling of the Beautiful and Sublime, I believe it is. All right. In those 2 writings, he really particularly talks about black people, or Negroes, right? And some of the physical features they had, and also their environment, and how those 2 things kept them from being fully human. All right. So Kant fully believed that because black people could not reason well, or couldn't reason at all, that didn't make them fit to be fully human. Instead, he believed because of their deficiencies in terms of reason, they were fit to be slaves or servants. Now, what's interesting is that in terms of race and racism, that meant that they were naturally disposed to the state and they could do nothing to change it. Did I throw it off? All right, that could do nothing to change it. And also, I wanted to read this. I brought this in here to read to you. This is from the essay On the Different Races of Men. And in this essay, he talks about, some of the physical features of Negroes, their intellectual deficiencies. So just an example of how he thought, right? So he says in this, besides all this, human warmth generally promotes the strong growth of animals. In short, all of these factors account for the origin of the Negro, who is well suited to his climate, again, where you come from, how that affects who you are, namely strong, fleshy, and agile. However, because he is so simply supplied by his motherland, he is also lazy, indolent, and dawdling, right? All based on environment. Now, again, because black people, in Kant's view, didn't have the rational capabilities to improve themselves, to progress, to be educated, to advance, to become part of to be enlightened in a sense, right? They were less than also their environment. So that's like the most basic way to put it. What their physical features, how they looked, and also their natural environment where they came from for him made black people deficient. But he wasn't the only person that believed this. He was just a part of an era that were tying race to ideas of what designated people as being less than human.
What research were they using at that time to justify that?
Word of mouth. Word of mouth. They didn't know any black people. They heard stories. They were visiting Africa. They didn't, they weren't living near black people. Word of mouth. Some explorer came back, or some missionaries came back and said, this is what we saw in Africa, or, this is what we told these people are like. As a matter of fact, a later philosopher than Kant, Georg Hegel, talks about getting information about black people from missionaries and believing their account. So they didn't know anybody personally. Word of mouth. It's just like today. The only thing I can compare it to is like white people. If they have certain white people who don't live anywhere near people of color, and they watch the news every night, and every night in the news they see, oh, this black person's robbing this person, or this black person shooting this person, or some guy in a hoodie is doing some bad thing. That's where they get their information from. They have no personal contact. It's all secondhand knowledge. So they were guilty of the same thing.
You know what I always struggle with in regards to intellect and education, how those with supposed education tend to be those who generalize the
most. Yeah, it is. It's the same thing, but there's a reason for it. See, it wasn't just that Kant or Hegel or Descartes or whoever wanted to just put down persons of color, especially Negroes. They were also trying to elevate what whiteness represented. So that is why in Kant's book, A Critique of Judgment, all right, he talks about this ancient sculptor called Polyclitus. And Polyclitus had this sculpture that he created called the Door Forest. And for Polyclitus, this represented like the ideal human being. So if you see the picture, white guy, chiseled, but it's not just physical beauty. It represented the heights of what human was supposed to achieve in terms of intellect too, because culturally he represented something as well. So I mean, at the same time, they're trying to disparage what blackness represent or what Negroes represent or where they came from, because not just Black people themselves, also their land of origin, Africa, would have represented to them, right? They're also trying to elevate what whiteness is supposed to represent in the European mind, or not even the European mind, but universally for all of us, what we're supposed to look to as an ideal.
And also speak about Kant when he speaks about comparing beauty.
Yeah.
Shouldn't use another culture's beauty as comparison.
Yeah. Well, you shouldn't, but the thing about Kant, he was trying to promote universal ideals, right? And so even though, comparatively, he did allow that certain cultures had different standards, which I talk about in the book, every culture has a different, the ideal is still the European white standard, or what any culture is supposed to achieve. So that's still the problem. No matter where you come from, you're still supposed to look to this ideal as being the example. Now, I'll say one more thing. A long time later on, there's a man, a sociologist named Irving Goffman, wrote a book it's called On Stigma. And in there, he has something about what is the ideal American, right? And this is during the 1960s, while all this racial protest is going on, all these things about race that come to the fore. Now, he says the ideal human being, this is Goffman now, not Kant or back to Polyclitus, white, male, Protestant, athletic, educated. I mean, the ideal that he believes all Americans are striving for, but none of us can achieve that. That's the problem, right? So we still have this image, even today, of what an ideal human is, what an ideal American is, and most of us are still striving to achieve that ideal or emulate that ideal, that image that's out there.